Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with my friend David Williams, who is the CEO of Williams Fudge and is also the current president of ACA International. How you doing today, David?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm excited to be with you. It's done a lot of good ones of these, and I'm honored to be a part of it now. So thanks for having me.
Well, I greatly appreciate you coming on as I've gotten the opportunity to get to know you a little bit. And as we were planning for this call, I mean, as soon as we got into a topic, it was just so exciting for us. So I look forward to learning from you today and kind of what's going on in the agency market. But for everybody who is not as familiar with you or has had the opportunity like me to meet you in person, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a second generation collector, like so many people here, or like so many people in our industry are. And so I grew up in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and that's where our company is. My dad and his partner started Williams Fudge in 1986. So I was 11 years old at the time, and so I got to do a little bit of the family business stuff at that time. I learned how to hang shelves and you know stopped at the gas station. Stopped at the rest areas to get telephone books for skip tracing and all that fun stuff that happened back in the 80s. But I went off to school at Presbyterian College, which is a small school in South Carolina, and when I did that, I wanted to do something on my own. And frankly, when I graduated from college, I didn't want to come work in the family business, and my dad wouldn't hire me at that time either. So it worked out well for both of us. So I went and worked for a recruiting firm for a couple of years, and then rode that into a manufacturing facility down in Anderson, South Carolina, and did some recruiting for them down there. And then after about 4 years, there was a sales position available at Williams Fudge, so I came and interviewed for it, and I did collect a couple summers in college, which is something I'll never forget. And as you make decisions on things that happen at a collection agency, having that experience and understanding what the collector goes through and gets to have fun with is invaluable. So, but I started in sales, and so Williams Fudge, we specialize historically in institutional receivables and student loans. So I was traveling around to the colleges, universities, and trying to sell them on using our services, obviously, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, that kind of went from 2000 to towards 2008, 2009, and we were growing a lot during that time. So it was fun to be a part of the sales process, getting to know our clients really well, and prospecting. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what we do, my perspective is we're all in sales, and so whether you're selling, hey, listen to my podcast, or you're selling, hey, use my collection agency, or hey, use me to buy your debt, or whatever it is within the industry, we're all in sales. So
Sure.
I enjoyed that part. And then I moved back internal in about 2009, and I was doing finance, HR, cleaning toilets, whatever needed to be done at that time. And like a lot of us have. And so then my dad retired in 2014, and I became president then. And we had a CEO that was between the two of us, Bob Perrin. So he was working here then for a while, and eventually, he moved into a more strategic role within Washington and some of that stuff. And so then I was kind of doing my best to run the company, and I'll always say, I think we all know, like, having the right people around you is a really important thing, and I do, and I'm blessed. And one of the best things, and one of my things my dad taught me is, like, hire people smarter than you are, and that makes you pretty smart if you do that. So that's what I try to do, and so that brings us to this point. That was a short amount of time to tell about 25 years of what's going on. But
I appreciate the condensed version of the story, and I think it's very interesting. I'd like to have you participate in some of the generational collection type content that we've been creating. I did a webinar recently on the topic, and I think that there's a lot of families that have built great businesses, and this seems to be an industry that leads itself towards these family type opportunities. So, but tell us a little bit more about Williams Fudge. I know that you guys are concentrated on student loans. You were at one point, but give us kind of the quick pitch here. Tell us a little bit about Williams Fudge and what it is that you guys do there.
Yeah, so we collect defaulted loans. We do some first party work, mostly third party work directly for colleges and universities. So,
Okay.
simple way to put it, for the University of Florida, they have outstanding receivables. They send it to us. We typically work on a contingency basis. So, if we collect $100, then we get 20 and they get 80, or whatever the fee is. So, we work with about 1,500 colleges and universities across the country, all 50 states. So we've been real successful in that area. We treat our clients as partners, and the sales portion of Williams and Fudge and client services portion is really important to us. Our leadership team mostly has a sales background. So, I like to say, hey, we're going to take care of our customers. We're going to collect with the best, we do, but where we differentiate ourselves with our customer service and our sales approach, and our partnering and educating our clients and some of that. So, that's historically what Williams and Fudge has been. We actually, like everybody else, when we went through COVID and all of a sudden, higher ed was like, oh, you can't collect higher ed anymore, and we're going to forgive student loans and all of this. We were like, whoa, we said we felt diversified, right? 1,500 clients, none of them were more than like 3% of revenue at the time.
Mhm.
So we always felt like we were diversified, but then all of a sudden it was like, wait, we are diversified by number of clients, but not by industry type. So
Yeah.
we started selling a little bit in other verticals, credit unions, some banks, some things like that, and also purchasing some debt in the space that we know.
Mm.
So that helped, and that worked for a little while. But one thing we found is, if we wanted to really diversify, we needed to take some more steps. So we started looking, probably 2002, 2001, for some acquisitions, and looked at a bunch of different companies because we kind of saw the writing on the wall and what's happening in the industry, obviously. And so, this past July, we closed on RGS Financial, company down in Richardson, Texas. So we were able to acquire them, and it was a great opportunity for us because the owners I've known for a long time.
Mm.
Benchmark groups are a big thing in this industry. You hear about a lot of people getting together and talking about the things that are specific to our industry and all the fun that we get to have and all the different things that we get to do. So, I had met Mike Riles and also his wife, Kathy. It's probably been 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So, um, we knew we had a good culture, a good culture fit between the two companies.
Mhm.
And so, we started talking, and worked out a deal to where we acquired them, and now we're partnering with them and a lot of the people down there, and they are in the financial services area. So,
Mm.
it was a little bit. The company was a little bit bigger. They have about, around 60 employees, or so. So it was a little bit bigger probably than what we thought would be our first acquisition, but it's
Mhm.
worked out great. And so here we are.
That leads us to some really interesting topics, questions, conversations, right? So from an M&A standpoint, I mean, it's definitely something that is a hot button across the industry. I think a lot of organizations are going through it. Now, I've been hearing about it for a number of different reasons too, right? Like there's different reasons that I think the M&A environment in our industry is getting pretty hot. And I think part of that is ultimately acquiring organizations that allow you to move into new product types, right? So it might be for product diversity, it might be for client diversity, it might be for access, or it might be operational efficiencies, right? Like a tech stack or a specific tie together that just really makes a good fit. In your case, it sounds like you had a multifaceted M&A that you undertook. One was that you had a new area that you were able to move into, a new product, right? But you also had a good culture fit. And that is one of those key kind of difficult to measure type of items as you're trying to bring these things together. So as you kind of went through it, like what was your core motivation towards moving into the M&A space, right? Looking at doing that type of an acquisition.
I think probably sustainability, long-term
Hmm.
sustainability.
Okay.
We, as Williams and Fudge, with the regulatory, with all of the states, with all of the different things that we have to do, the expenses, the technology, it takes a certain amount of money to operate a collection agency right now. I mean, you
Yeah.
have a lot of expenses that are there. But once you get all that done and once you understand the CFPB and the other regulators that are out there, we feel like the scalability is able to happen. And that's what we've
Mhm.
tried to build, our technology as well to be able to plug in. And that's when you say plug in, it's like you think, oh, well, we'll just plug it right in, it'll be fine. Well, that's not how it works. But the ability is there, right? So
Mhm.
so I think that's for us was sustainability. And another thing too that's interesting that we haven't thought about before, but when you acquire someone, if they have the right type of employees, then these employees are going to come, come with you. So
Mhm.
that's and in a world where hiring and finding people is not as easy as it once was, that's also a benefit of it. So
It's going
yeah,
to
I
give
mean,
you opportunities to new markets, right? So like when you're hiring, you're not just hiring in South Carolina, you're now able to hire in other locations as well.
100%. Yeah. So that was our main motivator. But you're right. I mean, the things you mentioned before is spot on, and that's what we need to be looking at, as an industry, because you have to at some point. I mean, there's a few exceptions, but at some point, I think going, hey, we either need to grow or we need to be looking at an exit strategy. I
Mhm.
think that's where we are.
I think that's pretty reasonable. So what is your prediction over the coming, let's call it 24 months, right? And I know that we're right at the crest of the wave, right? Over the past couple of weeks, we've been seeing information coming out that like auto deficiency is at an all-time high, right? So we're looking at kind of the crest of the wave. There's a lot of indicators that are starting to lead us to believe that the wave is here. So from your perspective, like what's your prediction over the next 24 months in terms of the M&A market across really receivables management?
Yeah, I think I think it's going to continue to increase. I mean, one of the things that we talk about within ACA is, obviously looking at what we need to do for our members and how we best serve our members. And
Mhm.
when we talk about that, there is a push towards being able to not only reach out to owners and high level leaders within organizations, but also reach out to people within the organization that are in compliance, that are in finance, that are in these other areas, because we do see that consolidation continuing to happen. And those people are going to need the support from the association, just like historically, attorneys have and executive leadership has and those kind of things. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that it's going to pick up steam, and I think there's so many medical agencies out there that have historically been mom and pop shops, for lack of a better term, that have
Mhm.
kind of worked with the doctors or worked with the local people. And unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder for those people to make it. So, I think they're going to be looking at ways out. And one of the things that's interesting to me, being a family business, one of the things that's important to people a lot of time is they want to feel like their baby or their family business, whatever, kind of one and the same, is going to be taken care of. So,
Mhm.
trying to continue to drive culture and do things the right way, I think is going to be important for all of us.
I think that's an insightful way to look at it. And, I know that you have a deep understanding of how some of these local organizations are working, how some of those things roll up to larger organizations. And ultimately, I agree wholeheartedly when it comes to their desire to keep that business going, right? Like they've made a commitment to their employees and they don't want to see, they're not looking to sell for you to strip the book, right? Take the clients and shut everything down. They're looking for someone who's going to kind of take up where they left off. And it may be running multiple brands at some point or even just winding down old business, in the support of a larger organization. But I think you make some really interesting points. Now, as we talk about the change or the wave that we expect to be coming here, right? There's always this balance of volume of accounts and the collectability of accounts. And I think that's going to be something that shifts fairly exponentially. And so I know we've been in the business, I think, for roughly the same, time block. But as we go back and we think about 2008, there was tons of accounts, but it was very difficult to collect. And then come COVID times, and you find that there's a very low volume of accounts and they're very liquid. So now, as we're going back into what we're expecting to be that inverse relationship, right, with lots of accounts and low collectability, how do you think that'll have an effect on that M&A marketplace?
I think it's gonna create even more, because I think
Mhm.
people, either you understand how to work that volume or you don't. And,
Mhm.
I think you and I are on the same page, and a lot of people are too, of, if you continue to work accounts the way you were working them during COVID, or I say during COVID, which is probably not the right term, but during a time where liquidity is high,
Mhm.
then your expenses are going to outpace your revenue very, very quickly. And so, you have to be first. You got to be willing to work the accounts differently, but you also got to be able to work the accounts differently. And how much has that changed since 2008? Right? I mean,
Mhm.
in 2008, that basically meant you needed to score your accounts and put the right accounts on the dollar,
Mhm.
pretty much. But
Yeah.
now that's where we are now, is talking about, can you drive accounts towards self-service so
Mhm.
that your expenses per account are a lot lower? And can you put the technology in place to do that, and make it a frictionless experience for the consumer? And if you can do that, keep your costs down on the front end, then, and now, in addition to the traditional scoring model, what do we have? Machine learning, right?
Mhm.
So that, and that is scoring to an extent, but that's going to change a lot here over the next few years. And the ability to find out how people want to be contacted, where and when, and how they want to pay, is something that we're going to be able to do. So all that's going to be
Mhm.
important to use, I think.
I feel like it used to be driven based on good or bad, right? This account is good, I'm going to do my thing with it, or this account is bad, I'm going to push it off to the side. But now the world is very different. So now what we have is five different communication channels that we may be right for the right person at the right time. So you don't have good and bad, you have kind of this multifaceted, multi option, right?
Yeah.
To where it's kind of almost like good and bad for each one of those, and then prioritizing which one is the best for that particular account, which is just amplifying the criteria for the decision exponentially, right? So we used to make this decision based on like 4 or 5 criteria, whether it be a score or whatever. And now you're like, okay, I need to cross reference between the scores that I had been using, the scores for individual channels, my understanding of those channels, the preferences and permissions that I've recorded from that consumer. It feels like now there's a giant metrics of things that can drive decision making. Are you finding is it making it more complex, or is it actually making it easier?
That's an interesting question. Um, I think, first off, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think that was very well said. I think if you have the right people, it could potentially be easier. I mean, there's a lot more data out there,
Mhm.
and there's value in data, obviously, but there's a lot more data out there that can be utilized if you can gather it the right way first, and
Mhm.
then execute what you've gathered. I mean, it's sort of like people talk about problem solving being such a big deal, but first you got to identify a problem, right? So you have to have people that can identify problems before they can be solved. And a little bit like that, like, you have to be able to get the data first, and then you have to be able to utilize the data to communicate with the consumer they want to be the way they want to be communicated with. The communication models, we talk about the millennial generation, or the one younger than that, and all of these wanting only to not to talk to anybody. Well, really, that's not the case. It's really pretty much everybody that want to talk
Yeah,
to everybody now.
true.
Really, if you get a call from a number that you don't know, like, I'm prone not to answer that.
Mhm.
And part of that is probably what my job is, but I'm prone not to answer it, and I think there's a lot of people that way. So
Part of it
figuring
is
out
just being busy, right? Like there's a
Yeah,
lot of times where I'm not going to touch these phone calls because it like there's the volume versus the time, and
right.
there's a balance.
Right, right. That's exactly right. So yeah. So I mean, I know. I mean, you having talked to a lot of different people. I mean, where do you see this going as far as the M&A market?
So I think that the M&A market remains hot. I think that more organizations coming together because I think those organizations that have not already put digital into their strategies, that are not already going down that path, have a higher likelihood of being acquired by somebody who did. Right. And so I feel like there was a time in this industry where you waited to see where the herd went and then you followed the herd. Right. But I don't think you can really do it that way anymore because now things are moving so fast that the herd of gazelles is already, you know, 6 miles down the
Yeah,
road before
yeah.
you're even starting to run, and the pace of technology is just moving so quickly that I think that we will see more of that M&A. I think it's also going to be driven somewhat by regulation through enforcement. And what I mean by that is right now they're going after the medical debt, but once they're done with the medical debt, I mean, they're just going to stop and they're going to be like, hey, like mission accomplished? Or are they going to come after student loans? Then they're going to come after auto, then they're going to come after credit card, right? Like I feel like it's an ongoing process of the government's attention being on one particular thing at a time. And I think that that starts to become a little bit scary, partially because it creates some difficulties in our ability to lend, right? Credit scores and these manipulations of what are supposed to be risk-based models are not really measuring the same risk that they were intended, or at least not if the CFPB has their way. So I do think you'll see more consolidation because it's going to take money to fight those battles.
I agree. But just for clarification, student loans we already had our returns, so we're good.
I don't know, man. I saw on Instagram earlier today about student loan forgiveness all over again,
Oh
right?
yeah,
So
oh yeah, oh yeah.
I'm saying that you definitely have had your moment in the sun, but I don't see it as ever being over. I think this is going to be a continued attack because at some point they're going to say, "Hey, oh well, look how well it's working when we're not reporting medical debt. You shouldn't be able to report this. You shouldn't be able to report that. You shouldn't be able to report the next thing," which again is just degrading the value of these risk-based models.
You're
But
absolutely right.
lending is a risk versus reward probability. Why would I lend money that I can never collect? The only thing that you can do is raise interest rates to offset your risk. And now everybody pays the fee. And I think we're already feeling the crunch, inflation, and other things that come from that economic factor.
I agree with you, and I also one of the things that I've thought about a lot lately is when you talk about consumers and you talk about protecting consumers. If we're only protecting consumers that aren't paying their bills, then is that protecting consumers as a whole? And with what you
No.
just said, I feel like it's absolutely not. And I feel like the crunch that we are seeing that is coming down is going to impact the people that need it the credit the most. You know,
Mhm.
a little bit like access to healthcare. You know, if you create a situation where you have to pay up front, you and I are blessed enough to be able to do that, right? But other people aren't. And
Mhm.
so then doctors, like my own doctor, is talking about moving into a concierge model where he's going to have a certain number of patients that pay a certain amount a month, and that's who he's going to take care of. You know, it's almost like a subscription doctor model. So you know
But
the
they're getting backed in a corner.
right, and we know what America does, and what the business world does is adapt. You know,
Mhm.
and the way they adapt is might not be the way some people are looking for us to adapt.
Well, that is the fear, right? The rise in interest rates, and I mean, it's already something that's happening now. If I've got an 800 plus credit score and I go get a mortgage, I'm now paying a fee on top of my mortgage to subsidize those with a 610 credit score, and I understand the objective that they're trying to achieve. I don't believe in the way in which they're trying to achieve it, but then it takes guys like you and I who are going to go, why take a personal mortgage? That should be through a trust or an LLC, right? So, like those that are capable will still continue to find those other methods,
Right.
which I think is just kind of a self fulfilling prophecy. Hopefully, what we'll see is some sort of a balance to how this is all going down, and regulation by enforcement could be retracted to some level. Even I was reading today that Congress was, putting a resolution before the House to stop one of the CFPB's more recent rules, and that we already have a president claiming that he's going to veto any action that might happen in that regard. And I'm hoping that this doesn't all go down between now and the time that this video gets published. But I do see, some of these things starting to unfold, and I think it creates a curious question about what happens in the election next year. And I'm sure that that the results of that election will have a direct effect on what happens in this industry for the coming decade, as I think each presidential change or continuation does. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this all starts to unfold, but I do believe the M&A market will remain hot. I believe there's a lot of organizations that are currently out there looking to buy licensed organizations. I think the amount of time that it takes to become a fully nationally licensed collection agency and the process that you have to go through has become a major barrier to entry. And so I think acquisitions of organizations that have those licenses, that's another driving factor in which you'll see some of these organizations get acquired.
Very good point. Very good point. Because there's the barriers are high. First you got to know, then you got to pay, then you got to have all the different intricate details from state to state, and then you start talking about cybersecurity, and the insurance, and the boxes you have to check for the SOC audit or the PCI audit, or all of these different things that just it's never ending. It really isn't. And so that barrier to entry is high, and it's also the reason kind of what I said before is the people that have that, when you talk about scaling, it's still difficult, but you can do it because you've got those building blocks in place.
Well, David, I think you bring up a lot of good points. I'm hoping I can get you to come back on here again in the near future and continue chatting with me, because this was a lot of fun, and I feel like I learn a little bit from every interaction that I have with you. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask David and myself, you can leave those in the comments below on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. If you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments below as well, and hopefully I'll be able to get David to come back at least one more time to help me continue creating great content for a great industry. But David, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate all your insights and knowledge.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and you sign me up. I'll be here again for sure.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to it. We'll get you on the calendar for 2024. And until next time, everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you all again soon.